matters of investigation on the 26th of February. It was on the agenda for the 12th of February, the 26th, then for the 25th of March. Then the 11th of March, the 25th of March came and went. Then, surprise, surprise, the matters under investigation fell off. On the 8th of April and the 15th of April agendas, but I thought I'd pressed it. So I just wonder, councillors, why you were not monitoring your matters under investigation. Had somebody slipped that off the agenda, hoping it would go away? I hope not. So I emailed the Chief Executive thinking that the report must have appeared on a council meeting since it had slipped off the radar. So, hello, it's back on today's meeting. And for those again who weren't there, I tried to simplify my discussions in September last year. It was 8 months that justice has taken to grind away. 8 months. I hope the rest of your urgent business is not so slow. But I tried to simplify my assumptions of the room sizes that appear to be available for community centre purposes by describing them as double garage sizes. And the biggest room in that Te Atia library is no bigger than 2.5 double garages. Quite clearly, when you get into the existing community centre, you will understand there's not many rooms smaller than 2.5 double garages. Quite a small space for public gatherings for the community centre business. And then I see on the matters under investigation, the report to council, note a report analysis of facilities in Selwyn Central available for future use came before council in March. That's this 48-odd page document that came to the meeting on the 25th of March, which was duly adopted by council, and I don't remember if that was a Zoom meeting, but it was adopted. I don't know whether there was debate or not. But council, in adopting that report, and at page 206, Martine was interviewed, and Martine has been the manager of the Rolleston Community Centre for a long period of time. And her quote to the Global Leisure report writer, and I quote, "My view is the new library and community centre is more of a library than a community centre. There is little space in the new library for community activity. We often have hire after hire in our rooms and spinning out the back. We were led to believe that the new facilities would provide much of the delivery that currently occurs here. We are not seeing that. That is the case when we consider the spaces and what would happen." And then Ginny Bowden, who has obviously long experience in community centre management. Our question is what happens to the smaller activities, i.e. move it to music where they come together for biscuits afterwards and it's more social than activity based. Without the hospitality spaces, this is not going to happen in the new library and at Foster's Indoor Centre. Council, I put it to you, you accepted those statements in that report, you approved it, you didn't deny they were incorrect, and these are from people who are at the coalface, clearly telling you in this report that you accepted that it's not a community centre, it's a library. And yet I still see commentary that it's called the Rolleston Library Community Centre. And unfortunately, the report writer today, and I don't know who's the council's group manager property, all these fancy labels would help the community if they had the person's name attached to it. But I presume it's Mr. Marshall. And I put it to the report writer that his report's not worth the paper it's written on. It's really trying to justify the means of continuing to call the building a community centre. So today, council, I ask you to reject the report and pass a resolution that the word community centre will be dropped from all communications going forward on the new Te Atia Centre. Leave it at that. I think his last sentence says here, we're not trying to describe the building's various functions. Well, trying to justify it in this report as a community centre again is considering the myth that it's a community centre when quite clearly, according to your staff, back in March, it is not. Thank you.
Thanks, James, for that. Yeah, the 25th of March meeting wasn't a Zoom meeting. It was
no. So I couldn't see the debate on that meeting, but obviously the report was passed because we say here on the matters under investigation for the day that was addressed in that report. Well, yes, it was, but as I say, your two long-standing staff members who are intimately involved in the management of community centres haven't, like myself, haven't managed to see where the community centre activity can occur in their TRRTC.
Cool. Thank you for your submission to us today, councillors. Are there any questions? No, the matter will be addressed under the Chief Executive's report, which is in our agenda pages. And Jen, thank you for coming and bringing that to our attention.
And I'll see you again next Tuesday.
Thank you. We move to the confirmation of minutes from the Zoom meeting on the 13th of May. Moved Councillor Lyle, seconded Councillor McInnes. They're true and accurate record. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Councillor Alexander.
Just note that I've sent in a small correction to those minutes on page 18. Correction in the what was recorded.
Right, that will be added. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, declare it carried. The matters under investigation today, we have the naming is on the 10th of June, the implementation of district-wide rates for community centres, halls and reserves, and the introduction of the online centralised booking system review. And the same meeting on the 10th of June, Section 70A review of delivery services, management reporter. On the 24th of June, we'll receive an engineering advice on the solar panels for the indoor courts, and on the 18th of July, chlorination report for us parts of the Upper Selwyn Huts will be received. So those items that still come before us. If we look to the item 1, the mayor's report today is today's available report. I haven't put anything down. The only update since we were last together was yesterday. We held a meeting with all the metrics data that was shared with councillors last week, and that was presented in a webinar format to the community. There was about 100 viewers at the time, and it'll be available online on the council website for people to be able to access that information. There are a number of question and answers through the interactive format, which I think went well, and the feedback I had today from one of the business groups I think this morning was that it was a positive move. So we'll be looking to run those probably monthly, sometimes with metrics data, but also just thinking about who are the people in Selwyn who have got things that are going to be worth sharing with the community on a wider basis than just around the council table. So I'll be working with the CEO on what those appointments will look like and who it will be. Again, I want to say thank you to the people that have been involved in making the technology work. I understand we're now live for this meeting today on Facebook, so thank you for joining us. Sorry you weren't able to be here for the start of the meeting. We're now back in council chambers. It's great, so we'll be able to connect with you digitally today. Other than that, I have nothing else to report, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions if councillors have any. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to also congratulate staff for working on the response to request that the community may continue to live stream our meeting. I think it has been a good outcome of the COVID epic that we've actually started live streaming meetings in the road.
Yes, thanks, Mark. I'll move my verbal report. Second, Councillor Lyle. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, declare carried. Second report today, page 28 through 31. This is Chief Executive.
Mayor, councillors, thank you and good afternoon. Not a lot to add to the items in my report. The first issue was suspension of standing orders for annual plan hearings and deliberations. So those meetings initially next Tuesday, the 2nd, Wednesday, 3rd of June, followed by Thursday, the 11th, and Friday, the 12th of June. So understanding orders meetings can't sit for more than 3 hours continuously without a break, unless we're resolved to do so. So meeting on Tuesday, the 2nd, is kicking off at go through to around 6 p.m. and similar times on Wednesday, and then kick forward to Thursday, the 11th of June, also start at 9:30. And that will be a long day because that is the deliberations day, and that may well move forward to this week, which will also be at 9:30 a.m. start. So recommendation B in my report on page 28 is to agree to suspend the council standing orders for those 4 meetings. Item number 2 is the matter that Mr. Christensen referred to and was addressed to the public court. The provider of information was not, as I've said in my report, the group manager property, but rather was the group manager of community services. So if you have any questions on the content of that, we'll be very happy to answer those. Over page 30, just commentary, high-level commentary around the economic impact of COVID-19 across our district. This is still evolving. We'll continue to quite some time to relate through to that part of this year and to early next year, but I've made comments in there around firstly the strength of our district's economy as we went into the lockdown period, albeit we acknowledge from an interim report that the economy is likely to contract by about 5.4% from the year to March 2021. Artists and areas are likely to be construction. They're talking about 27% reduction, accommodation and food services. Unemployment is expected to decline. Bear in mind, currently our unemployment rate is just over 2%, so very, very low. It's expected that we could lose up to 2,100 jobs, which would take unemployment rate to 8%, which the only possible is the biggest national rate. House prices, we will wait and see what will happen there and how long the recovery period will take. And anybody looking for a full copy of that report, it is on Council's website under the COVID-19 pages. And the final item in my report, Mr. Mayor, just a reminder that our business directory, Selwyn is open, is accessible through links on our directory. Again, there are over 6,000 businesses operating in Selwyn. Made contact like 200 at the stage, which has resulted in like 500 bed directory, and we have staff resources dedicated to continue to update that. So that is a brief summation, Mr. Mayor, of my report, but as I say, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, David. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. The first issue I had was item 2 on your report, Mr. Ward, was actually the title of the report, that section of the report, naming of Rolleston Community Centre, Te Ara Atea. It's actually Rolleston Library and Community Centre was the title that we had today. It's not Rolleston Community Centre. The Rolleston Community Centre is around the corner on Rolleston Drive. So the report is in itself poorly titled, and I have a great deal of sympathy for Mr. Christensen because it's providing confusion to our community that we're calling Te Ara Atea the Rolleston Library and Community Centre. We have a Rolleston Community Centre around the corner. I understand the reason we may want to include Community Centre in the title, but I think it would be clearer if it was simply called Library. And I don't believe it's actually the Rolleston Library. It's actually the Selwyn Central Library. It's a library intended to serve this ward. None of our libraries are built to serve a township. They're built to service a ward. We have 4 libraries, 1 in each ward. Whilst we've named them after the township that they're in, it might be clearer if we called this the Selwyn Central Library, because then it would avoid confusion with the Rolleston Community Centre. So perhaps it should be Te Ara Atea Selwyn Central Library.
Thanks, Michael. Councillor Reid.
Thanks, Seth. From the way that I see it and read the report that I agree with is that I think Te Ara Atea stopped the name of it, and I thought that's what it was going to be going forward. So it encompasses all the range of things that go on in that space. So we can't actually detail those in a name. And I think Te Ara Atea sums it up. And I'm thinking back to when Tūronga opened in town, Leanne Dalzell was very clear that Tūronga was the name. And I think we should be focusing that Te Ara Aotea is the name of this new building that's going to Folkestone.
Thanks. So with that in mind, Nicole, I think there is a C in today's resolution that confirms Te Ara Aotea as the name of the new council facility and construction on Rolleston Reserve. Just clears it up that the name is Te Ara Aotea. Correct. Councillor Miller?
From Mr. Christensen's comments, I don't think the name is actually concerned. It's about the usability of the space and what availability of space there is. Just reflecting on Councillor Alexander's comments, post-earthquake, we've had, in my view, an overt strategy of trying to rationalise our services. So where we do build a new facility, we try and centralise our community space and our libraries into one place and try and make the best use of resources. This is probably an extension of that. Mr. Christensen's concerns, in my view, are around have we got enough community space in Te Ara Aotea to satisfy the community? Is there enough meeting space? And is there the opportunity for groups that currently use the community centre to continue that way? I guess in a minute I'll pass to our community services manager to ask that question. Perhaps we should try to respond. But in my view, what we did do is not just focus on one facility, but focus on wider Rolleston community, what spaces are available for community use. And I think that's what our study showed us, that there is a lot of space in Rolleston and just needs to be accessed. If you look at, for instance, the high school, the council chambers, the schools, the school halls, our new indoor stadium, there's a large portion of indoor space which is available for hire, which currently is not often used. Post-earthquake, we saw a real resurgence of people getting back to the primary schools and using the space. And again, it's about not trying to rebuild or extend uneconomic space, but it's about providing the community the best ability to provide the usage. So can I ask you just have a brief word about how you see the use and whether you believe there is enough space within Rolleston for those community groups that described to still use the facility or have facility space?
Mindful that the future use of Rolleston.
Sorry, Denise, can you just turn the microphone on? Thank you.
I am mindful that the future use of Rolleston still part of the study. So it sits here with future use determined and exists. In terms of the activity that are currently located in that place in the Rolleston Centre, we are very clear that, for example, the use of fitness and recreational activities that with Boston Park Indoor Recreation Centre being built, that would more appropriately relate, but also that we don't get sufficient demand use in both facilities. There are a number of those types of activities facilities available, so we would not be intending to replicate both facility and Boston Park. We obviously Te Ara Aotea, as you have some constraints in terms of money and investment, and we endeavoured to make a whole range of use spaces. I think that there is some reconsideration of how much in terms of commercial spaces we need to have a facility and a large number of facilities across the agriculture and large commercial space. So there is some constraints in terms of whether or not that's necessary in the centre, and that is certainly consideration that's gone into Te Ara Aotea and pulling back somewhat, and also the opportunity to potentially utilise both fires into patient. There, in terms of through, there are 1 or 2 that we would be wanting to consider. There are other facilities across the group, patient, by and large, between Te Ara Aotea and Boston Park.
Okay, Councillor Bank.
I'm not going to on the speaker right yet. Thanks for that. I listened to Jen and I've listened to Jen quite a few times and actually really do agree with them on this, and perhaps not for the reasons that have been put forward so far. I recall when we first talked about a library, and Mark's quite correct, it was the Selwyn Library. The Aotearoa Centre of a meeting place for people, really spot on name for a library for Selwyn. And it was right when we did build a new library that we did put some community space in it. Because a library, the traditional idea of a library, certainly for me, is not just a place in the old days you won't pick up books. You went to the library to pick books. Things have changed dramatically since then. The library is more of a meeting place. The problem as I see it, and I'm not sure if this is what Jen's alluding to, but if we keep calling it a community centre, we will weaken our cause or the cause to actually start to actually get a community centre which is relevant for Rolleston. So we keep calling this the Aotearoa Centre, a community centre. We weaken our case to actually build a community centre similar to what Lincoln has, which is exactly what Rolleston will need in the near future. The old community centre is outdated, so it needs to be replaced. And I would like to see an argument to replace that with a proper community centre, for the fact that we keep calling this a library a community centre. It's not. It's a library with a bit of community space. It always was. And we have argued this before. Not in fact, we didn't argue it. We agreed that it wasn't a community centre some time ago. And it's not. It's a library with some community space. We will be, in a few months, years' time, we will be arguing for a new community centre. And someone will get up and say, we've got one. That's what you've been calling this place. And that, to me, is the real problem.
Thanks for the discussion on this topic. I think we spent more than enough time discussing the name of the building that already has a name. So I'm happy to move A, B, and C, with C being confirmed to Aotearoa as the name of the facility under construction on the Rolleston Reserve. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Any more discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carries. Thank you. Item number 3 is on page 32 and 33.
By machinery motion, Mr Mayor and councillors, just to reinstate the allocation. We put these in place when we went into lockdown. Recommendations been straightforward as is the explanation, but the overriding is as we do maintain flexibility. We do revert back to 3 or.
Okay. Councillor Miller, moved. Seconded, Councillor Lyle. And Miller, do you want to speak? No. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The question for the Chief Executive is that those committees which defer have currently deferred their triennial meetings to re-elect committees. That deferment was originally because we had not received a report on the potential restructuring of community committees. Should they now go on with their triennial meetings or continue to defer?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the answer is yes, they should, and they were advised that at the community committees get together to Thursdays.
And Denise, do you want to add anything to that answer?
Just that elections are going to take place between September and November, that council staff are intending to work with committees to support them happening in a coordinated way, but close to half have already had their elections and meetings.
Thank you. Move from Miller, seconded Lyle. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? So carries. Item number 4 is on pages 34 through 50. It's a property transaction update. Douglas is with us today. Douglas is going to take us through your report. I think it's important that we look at the items that are held in there and hold any questions to the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Wesson. So a number of major projects, and here all are back up and running after the lockdown process, which is all pleasing. So maybe what I'll just do is we'll just go through them and anyone's got specific questions. So Selwyn Aquatic Centre, the Aotearoa.
Mr Mayor.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Right. Just are we going to note that in this report, the project title, we're simply going to drop Rolleston Library and Community Centre out of the description of the title, and also then in project overview,
this comes back to the problem that Mr. Christensen discussed. Project Overuse is a new innovative library and community centre. But we've just agreed it's not really a community centre. So we're going to.
So, Councillor, I was taken under about 5 minutes ago, we just confirmed that the name of it is Te Aratia, and going forward, we expect that all council communications, including our internal report, will refer to that building by that name.
Wasn't clear from the resolution report, but thank you for that update. Interruption, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions on that item? No, next one, Douglas.
Foster Park Indoor Courts. Brookside Road subdivision will be coming to you next meeting, the process for how we handle those section zones. The Responsible Camping Tourism Infrastructure Fund projects. So obviously we noted that this will be the last period in which these funds are expected to be available. We've done extremely well out of them. So it's currently working through what our claims will be. There are separate claims on simple defence funds as part of the lockdown process where we use free camping areas for COVID areas. That covers those two areas there. So the questions down to Surface Crown Land Project, which really just continues to proceed. This is an area we'll be looking to see now whether we can push further forward as part of trying to obviously free up more land. Dock and now put their own resource into this, which is really pleasing because we're one of the only councils working in this space. So we've obviously had interest from others. The Leaston projects, probably just really we've got them paused at this current time due to the consultation process we're following through the annual plan. Orada Community Centre replacement. So I've updated a number of issues there that were queued in the last 3 to 4 weeks. There is a submission. Go Orada, who are sponsoring the full project. Consider it in the coming few weeks. And the other issue we're coming is a report on how to handle the New Land pool and we'll deal with the environment plan. There's an issue around the heritage issues for that building as well. Update on the.
Douglas, sorry, could you just swap microphones? Someone's just playing up or sounds playing up for a second.
Okay, it's great home buildings. Two, we're just working on a little bit of work on Lincoln Event Centre at the moment, just get better understanding of what costs might be if we're going to increase the MBS percentage. And the same, we're doing some work currently at Tarea at Saviour as well, just to better understand what the investment might be if we want to lift those. It's our current position with those buildings. We're still on Kennedy Park, just a quick update there. There's not a lot of progress at this time, but we'll obviously be into that program in June, August in terms of that. We've got an update there on Reed's Pit. For those of you who drive past it, you'll see that the benching and contour at the bottom of the pit is now well complete. So that's moving on very nicely.
Just on Reed's Pit, Councillor Alexander.
Yes, thank you. I know when we originally approved the budget, it was to be being into motocross front. We've dropped the motocross functionality out of it, so possibly we should drop that out of the description because we don't really want motocross bikes coming within proximity of a neighbour. But the more important question I had for Mr. Marshall is actually, do we have any timetable for the opening for community use? I noted the landscaping is progressing very nicely, and presumably there'll be some grassing and landscaping works going on winter and all spring. Do we have any idea of a timetable for community use?
Well, I suppose if you get down to the next steps part of the report, which has quite a comprehensive timetable there, we don't have a definitive date like the 7th of October, rather than say, but getting close to the time and making sure weather doesn't cause us any issues putting the tracks together and just ensuring that they all settle fine, which I'm sure they will. And we would imagine something during the September-October period will be into the track site.
Thank you. And Councillor Haslam.
Thank you. Look, can I go back to the tough funding, please, with regards to the toilets? I note that we have a further delay with regards to supply chain of any of our toilets, and we have 2-year cost structure covering once that's installed How is that 2 years, or when is the 2 years going to start ticking? Or have we been paid upfront for those costs to carry on for 2 years?
I assume you're referring to the actual operational costs for these toilets, I assume. Yeah, so the two-year costs will be part of the 2021 financial year. They're the ones that are obviously operational, which is our key issue. And then those like the Springson public toilet, we would fully expect it'll be 2 years from commissioning. Commissioning for that one, as by way of example, is still probably a good 3 months away. So we would fully expect it to be a commission period. But Rikers is currently reporting on a pole position to TIF and responsible camping. So I'll double check to make sure that he's got that covered in his questions.
Thank you. People didn't demand.
Yeah, again, just really an update where that project is at. Obviously, they're all progressing well. That would be our, I suppose, the key popular projects as we see them. It's interesting that you'll see shortly, but certainly pump tracks and those BMX trot tracks, we should get a little bit of interest in submissions. And the Liffey Walkway Extension project is being very well received in the community. Comment on there on the Prebbleton intersections. So progressing there, provided some resolutions to us last meeting, which is very helpful, and just really just a matter of working through the process on those items. That's the final report there, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Douglas. Just on the Prebbleton intersection upgrades, I see the approved budget has got a 75% subsidy committed to NZTA, provided the project is substantially completed by June 2021. Obviously, with the issues that we've been having, COVID, and with them speaking to the landowners, have we been talking to NZTA about the fact that this project potentially could be pushed further out? Okay.
Look, I looked to Mr. Mays, he's down the end of the table there. Just, I think he's sure he's been in contact. I mean, fair to say this is a shovel in hand and all the stuff.
Just have to be conscious because 75% subsidy is quite large, and make sure that we retain it.
Mr. Mason.
Okay, thanks for the question. So the main sort of premise for the approvals for the funding for the intersection upgrades was that the NZTA were looking to have us achieve substantial completion of projects by mid-2021. And on that basis, the 75% enhanced funding rate was to help us accelerate that or achieve that. So as you know, we've been working through a rather extensive process on land acquisition and been engaging actively with the property owners in that for those two intersections using the Public Works Act. So where NZTA are at, where we're at with them and the Christchurch City, who are also partnership with us in regards to one intersection, is that we've been keeping them informed of progress, and they understand that the issues that we've been facing around property acquisition and also with the delays potentially through the COVID-19 situation. At this stage, there's nothing to suggest from either the NZTA or the Christchurch City Council that have got any concerns, and they are aware that we're making our best efforts to achieve these projects. I think the main thing that the NZTA will be wanting to see going forward is that we are being able to get some shovels in the ground, and that we can at least start one of the intersections and show that we're actually making some real world sort of progress. On that basis, the NZTA will be generally happy to carry forward funding. I would hope at the enhanced funding rate, as they have agreed, and as I said before, there's nothing to suggest at this stage they've got any concerns with what we're doing.
Thank you. Any further questions on the report? Not being any mover and seconder to receive the report. Alexander and Lyle. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Douglas. Next item is on item number 5, pages 51 through 58. Robert Love from Harris, and this is around a plan change 63 in Darfield. I'll work along, and I'd like to just talk us through the highlights of the report. Thank you.
Good afternoon all. So I am the Officer Processing Plan Change 63, which was submitted by Milday Services Matthew Reid. It's in Darfield on Complete Road. The report has only provided a suggested recommendation that the plan change be accepted notification as well as substantial assessment on the merits of the development at that stage. Some of the basics around it is to rezone approximately 60 hectares of rural outer plains land into a mix of living one, which is around 14 hectares, which will be a mix of 90% density units, around 600 squares, and 13 medium density units, which is around about 430 to 550 squares, and 46 hectare area of living one third, which would be a mix of 283 standard lots, 6 lower density, around 1,000 squares, and 8 medium density. Within the living one area, it also includes provision for a retirement village, capacity of 56 beds, and 20 independent villas, so approximately 110 residents. They are proposing to provide their own reticulated community wastewater system for the living one area, and the application is currently with the Regional Council processing. There is an issue already highlighted with the use of the third area for the living one third. It is an issue and it will be dealt with at the assessment stage.
Any questions for Rob? Grant?
I want to move the nomination to speak to it.
Councillor Miller is the seconder. Seconded by Peha. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Robert. I really want to reiterate my concern about these continual not them against subdivisions. I think it's a positive move for Darfield, and I applaud the growth of it. But again, development involved being held up by our slowness getting our reticulated sewage underground operational. I think, Robert, you described potentially 600 hands or 600 units almost. Let's just use it for our number. It's approximately right. Plus you've got the retirement village and per unit. We've already got an existing consent for 172 units. So you quickly get up close to 1,000 planned or considered units, and then if you add Kirwee with the subdivision plans there is a large scale revolution going on involved. If we don't be proactive and get on top of this, unfortunately it's going to be a lot of money wasted. And I really implore us all to put a concrete stake in the ground and tell these developers and the community that this is coming. And I would ask the CEO to liaise with these developers. It seems nonsensical that they would be forced to build a short-term articulated package plant, and we're going to build a community scheme not long afterwards. So clearly there needs to be some action, and I look forward to the annual planning process. We'll make this more substantial, I suppose, but certainly my view is that it's coming, and we should liaise with these developers to ensure we don't make suboptimal.
Thanks, Councillor Miller. I don't want to get into a debate today about Darfield West. One of that, as a little said, the topic that will be discussed through the annual plan next week. We'll be doing submissions on that. So rather than short-circuiting that process, today is really around the merits or otherwise of the plan change before us. Except for comments, Councillor Miller, and we do need to make those decisions. So any other comments around the plan change itself? Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. I want to actually ask about when we actually look at the large tracts of land being put in subdivision, is there adequacy of water access this time as well for both firefighting and consumption? We know a lot about the sewage situation. What about the supply of potable water to these sections? Is that assessed at the subdivision stage and now before the plan change?
So Murray England has been involved through the pre-application and also assessing application for information as well. So he's of the opinion that there is sufficient water for this and it would be assessed at the plan change stage.
Thank you, Councillor McFadden and Councillor Alexander.
Just a question on the deferment. At what stage does that deferment come off? Is once we make a decision, does the actual plant have to be in the ground and running? Because lots of developers in the situation in the near future that next would be going to get this. And I was told that if we made a decision on sewerage, they'll then, they can go ahead.
So the only reason that we're looking at doing that portion of land is for wastewater system to be installed in Darfield. And that we lifted once that's actually installed, ready to go. Nitty gritty will be dealt with.
And Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, I support this plan change going out of consultation. I think it was unfortunate that we had comments about the proposal for a Darfield reticulated sewer system, because that by no means decided. If you read through the annual plan submissions, it's by no means clear community support for it. So I think it's premature, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, to be tying the two together at present. There's no guarantee of either. This being a plan change is subject to the hearing process that it will go ahead. And similarly, there'd be no, at this stage, there's no guarantee that Darfield reticulated sewer will go.
Thank you. And just final comment from me is around the feedback from the community over many years, and the development councillors will know this, particularly around retirement buildings and the ability for people to be able to retire, perhaps leave a farm or leave the house that they've been in that's been too big for them once they're at retirement stage or once one of their partner has died. And this plan's desire to address that, will be interesting to see the support of the community around that process, but that's a matter of feedback. So thank you for bringing it to us today, Robert. And been moved and seconded. Any further comments? All those in favour, please say aye. Yes. Carried. Thank you. Next up is on page 59 through 80, and I ask Nancy to come to the front desk, please. The council endorsed the submission provided to the Ministry of Transport dated 11th May 2020 on the 2021 government policy statement on transport, draft New Zealand Railway.
Thank you very much. Delight to be back in front of you all again and real time and meet people, so that's great. And also just on that, I'd like to thank everybody's assistance over the time in terms of helping prepare these submissions. I know it was sort of in fairly short order and all over the place a little bit at the time, but I appreciate the help that I did get. So we've got the covering report there. There's submissions attached to them. I can run through them, or if you wish to basically have me answer any questions, fine as well.
Thank you. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this? Councillor McInnes, Councillor Mokford. Is there any questions? No? Oh, Councillor Miller.
Also, a question, just say great work. I thought it was well done in a short time frame, and I thought it covered all of Selwyn's concerns in a relatively concise manner. So well done.
Appreciate that. We certainly put it this way. There were some occasions there that we could have some fun to think about these things, particularly within the whole aspect in terms of the COVID-19 situation. I think some of these submissions that had gone in a bit earlier, unfortunately, couldn't make those points, and so at least we could bring that into the equation.
Thanks, Andrew. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. And the next item is the transport monthly update on pages 81 through 99. Andrew, do you want to lead us through that?
Thank you. Start on that. I won't perhaps go through every single item, but I'll probably just reference the things that may be of importance at this point or worth mentioning, because obviously we sort of go through this fairly regularly. We've talked about the submissions just before, so we've done that. I noticed also in terms of the fact that in regards to the work the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee has been doing, yes, Sam has been involved in that. In regards to shaping the strategic objectives for the next regional land transport plan. So that's been quite a bit of work that's been undertaken during the period of lockdown, at various workshops and with the Transport Officers Group and also the mayors and the members of that committee, so that's great. We've also been working on two key areas in terms of the government's requirement for us to produce a MOCHA plan. That's been sort of a work in progress for some time. It's had a few hiccups, obviously with these type of things that we're trying to get consensus over Greater Christchurch, people have different views. That's trucking along okay now. We've been working on that very recently, and we've got a requirement to report that MOCHA plan back to the Minister in August, I believe. And prior to that, we'll be going to CA for
sign off. In terms of the some major transport projects, be aware of the start again of CSM2, which has been really great, and in terms of their focus on trying to get some of our local roading aspects out of the way. It's caused some disruption, but as I've said, we hope short-term pain for long-term gain. I note some information will be coming out of the NCTA very shortly, if not already, that the first stage of getting Trentdale Road vehicles onto the new part of the extension will be happening this weekend around Horse Junction Road and Springs Road on ramp. So that's sort of some really good progress, and we hope the rest of it from Robinson's Road will occur a week after. Just before we had a talk about the Preelton intersection upgrades, just to again reiterate that we're working very hard to try and get that or keep that progressing as much as possible. Certainly the lockdown did provide us with some challenges in regards to being able to get access to sites, to negotiations and things like that. We had to deal with this carefully because basically under the lockdown, we've had to take account of the disruption to people, and that we can't necessarily just go in there and, force our will, if you want to put it that way, in regards to meeting the strict timelines that the Public Works Act give us. And we've actually basically come to the position that we're essentially going to give people about 4 or 5 weeks grace, if you want to put it that way, from the current process, or the restrictive process in terms of notifications and dealing with this, just to give a bit of breathing space. We've also got the situation now that with the elections later on in the year and the change of government, potential change in government, that there's also the problem that then runs into it, perhaps getting this approvals through the government as well, because they've got to sign on and get on it from the Public Works Act perspective. So we're just sort of trying to massage the situation to the best that we can in terms of keeping everybody happy as much as possible, but keeping things ticking along. Great bit of news that during the lockdown, we've also now engaged a detailed designer, so that consultant will be in a position to start answering some of the tricky questions that the landowners have been asking of us, so that we can sort of get people happy and informed on that basis. Leeson Dawson Sideway, great work in terms of the staff done over the lockdown in terms of getting things lined up, ready to go. Post-lockdown level 3, so that work's underway. EV charging sites, I know that's something that you're very interested in, worship, so we've been working on that as well, and we're sort of slowly ducks in a row. We've had to get the legal agreements back to both Orion and charge them on that, and the final sites with Orion, so that's happened, and so we're just sort of doing the paperwork on that. I'll report from council on that shortly. And really, I suppose the other one, of course, the most sort of interesting of late is the item 4.10, our response to COVID-19, and the work that we did over that period in regards to putting together that $13.5 million shovel-ready project, which looked at renewals and rehabs that we had put forward for funding, which will look at sort of trying to address quite a big backlog that we've always been trying to put to sort out over quite a long period of time. And as I understand it, we've survived the first cut of that assessment, and it's now gone to the provincial growth fund people to look at in regards to seeing if they progress funding through that. So at least we survived the first cut, that's something, but fingers crossed in terms of how we go here. But it will certainly be a big help for not only the obvious reasons, but also if we get this additional funding, that takes the pressure off our existing funding for road maintenance and renewal, so that we can free up that area as well.
Thank you. I'll just say on that, it's any other councillors around Canterbury have picked a no response. So although you will consider it, doesn't necessarily good news. It's not a yes, that hasn't been a strong no alert. Washington might take that time.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, we have that information for when we apply with it. We are in one of the major applications as well as the potentially to the client. And being reasonably shovel ready and also ready enough to be polished, hope that looks. See how it goes.
Thank you. A couple of questions, Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, just the Colgate. the road level. You need to do no, not at this stage, because as I said in the report, obviously the next sort of stage was to have that sort of public meeting. Of course, with the restrictions at the moment, that's not a goer. So we'll have to talk to our staff and consultant helping us with that to sort of work out how to get that back on track. I suspect it may be a level 1 situation, but if we've got there, once you work through level 2, we'll certainly take it.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander.
Yes, thank you. 3 questions. Page 87, Capital Works. Have we got there yet? Well, when we get there, they flow on from there. So when we get there, I will carry on. Well, yeah, I guess there is. Who's responding to the question about the NZTA audit? Who will answer questions on that? Mark will. Okay, well, I'll let I think that's 3 questions.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Andrew, is there anything else? Thank you for your work. Thanks to the LEDs. And yeah, that's it. I did wonder the timing of that, what the delay is. At what point would we expect to have the network complete with LEDs upgraded?
That's a very good question. Basically, we like everybody else, everything had to stop during lockdown. We're starting back up again, as I understand it, we've been installing around late, so that's good. So basically, all the standard streetlight replacements will be completed shortly. But the problem is with our decorative lights. These are the fancy lights that we see in subdivisions. And from the information that we have already in the designs have been undertaken by competitors, that's going to be working out to be quite more expensive than we ever anticipated. So we're going to have to think about how that's going to be managed. Not apart from that, the other issue is that we're hearing that there's some supply issues out of China. Most of these lights are coming from, and so there's actually a supply chain issue with regards to getting lights and how that may affect the price as well. So there's a few things I have to look into in this and be able to be in a position to report back at a later time.
Thank you. With the more expensive lights, that still be affecting the 85% subsidy?
Yes, but we have to be really careful that we don't go too overboard in being decorative, because then NZTA will probably look at us sideways and saying, well, it's probably going overboard on this. So we have to strike the right balance.
And if that change was to happen, which sounds like it's sensible, to have an effective answer rather than a really expensive answer, is that something that will be decided by staff, or would we expect to see that in a report to council?
Up to this point, all the light selection has been done through methods and ourselves. We certainly are aware of the fact that residents may notice a change in regards to going from perhaps a fancy carriageway clock type thing to a more functional light, but something still aesthetically pleasing. But at this point, based on the limited sort of concerns that have been expressed by the public in terms of street light changes, we weren't anticipating that we would need to go for a sort of a full-blown let's consult on this. But what I'm happy to do is that I can come back with you with some examples of, we've got this light now, this is what it's going to be replaced with, and you can decide yourself if you think that that may cause an issue.
That's great. I think it's a decision we can make, but it'll be good to report it. So thank you. Mr. Chamberlain.
This was the lights, the most important bit is if we put on the white light around the orange light before, that makes it feel a bit harsher than what the orange light is. So that's then I just whether it's decorative light or not, what colour the light is, what colour it's about. So you're flying through this as obviously we've been back to level 3 and then level 2, so there's more activity out there and things like that. So it won't be each time. So but just with the lockdown, road maintenance, meant to be had a period there with not so much work's been done. And one of the the bigger dots, the last of our reseals, the 8 kilometres, typically completed, that's going to be in the first couple of weeks with the lockdown, was just cold weather now, we just have to carry on with that, sort of risk, doing the reseals now, trying to avoid, so that'll be done this year. Overall, we're going to be overspeed anyway, but just reduce the amount we're going to be overspeed by overall. So, unsealed road assessments, there's not a report on that, so maybe I'll give you a question on that, I guess so. And our rehab program will finish all the sites that we're doing this year. Capital works, things are underway again, at least, also Leeds Cycleway, actually doing the first lot of sealing today. First lot they got prepared, so the progression really well there, been really good weather, ground conditions are still good, so they're going to carry on with that, just be up against the cold the next 3 or 4 weeks, placing asphalt, but we'll just have to work around that, see how we go. Other intersections are being done as well, so the Curtis and the section of Dalville and Old West Coast Home, which they're completed now, so we're going to be working on the right 2 days on Eastern Road, so one of them requires culvert work, so that's going to get underway. And just being late in the year as well, they may, if you do preparation on the street to the ceiling, just will risk with that, but stay there to maintain it, do that spring this year. That's under low cost over, so that's part of next year's fund. Be good to get as much work as possible on those as well. So, but looking at Lotus Cycleway, there's that in a couple of weeks' time. So that's just a program to get in there and get contractors already and start working on that. And again, it's low cost service, that's supposed to be a lot of fun. So there's uncertainty on when they can start and they can finish the first one again. So it's just more certainty. I've got it out there now. And then on traffic signals at Lotus Denison, so they're back working there again as much as they can, so getting through as quickly as they can. They're still not quite sure the timetable for finishing now, but it's still near the end of June. I hope we have it all done, but that will depend on weather and things like that. What else? Road safety update. So just out there with Jessica being on board now, replacing Pete Daly. Jessica's started a week before lockdown, so she spent a lot of time at home by herself doing a lot of reading, asking questions of people on the phone, Zoom meetings, things like that. So, but she's worked really well with Steph, the school road safety coordinator, so they're getting things underway, and it's just a matter of learning the process, being totally new to the job, but quite a new, fresh perspective on it. And we thought we'd just include programs in these reports, just give you an idea what's going to be coming up. And obviously, we've been driving is one of the main ones, and sections is an ongoing one that we have. NZTA, it's a procedure order, it's the title of procurement there, something that we've missed. We've been doing proofreading, so especially a procedure order. So that's done, and that's the audit report. While that says that everything's effective as good as it gets. So there's been no issues raised. So that's one recommendation which we're dealing with anyway, because we've got the outline tendering. So late tenders won't be possible without trying tendering. Once the deadline's met, that's it. You can't submit anything up there. So we won't have late tenders coming to the office and drop the deadline. So that's what comes in. But so that's a really good result that we don't always get. One with no recommendations, no issues to deal with, no overhanging issues on previous ones. So it was, went really well. And one of that is block road sealing. So that was a resident is wanting to form and seal a section of block roads, no exit on a Hamptons road. So he's agreed to fund that forecast that Stanley was saying and maintain it for 10 years. So that's been signed off, and that's what he is going to do. So that is pretty much it. With the investment audit report there, we've read it, any questions on it, which I know Councillor Alexander has. So.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with the street lights, flag lights. Is there a list of intersections that have been done and to be done? We used to get that occasionally. I can't remember having seen one for some time. It would be useful to see. The second question was on the upgrade, the privately funded upgrade of Block Road. Will we be overseeing the design and construction while the resident will be funding the maintenance for the first 10 years? We do know that roads require maintenance for a much longer period. So what's our involvement with that? And the final point was that you could make further comment on the NZTA report about the paragraph regarding the low cost, low risk program we have scheme. Then the council itself needs to monitor
this in and explain where the comment comes from?
Certainly, flag lights, yeah, the low cost low risk projects are a combination of projects from, well, these are minor improvements. And so we have the efficiency database, we had a list of minor improvements, and being long previously put those all together in the low cost low risk program was asked for the funding to change, and he's put all those together. So that includes intersections, flag lights, things like that. So the first year was to get things underway as the first cut of it. So just going to have to sit down, we'll start involved between the supervisor in the field and get a feel for whether the project's got there correct. So there's a long list of those, and use that in your report to council. I have no problem putting that forward. It's just it's about a 10-year program something already, so it's a lot of time. So flag lights, ones that were chosen, they've been sent at random, and they were in places where they why you doing one down the road. Some flag lights are a lot more expensive to put than others. If you've got low voltage, then it's okay. If you've got high voltage, you need a transformer, so you're spending $20,000 straight away for one street light, which you don't necessarily want to do. But if it's part of an upgrade, and for example, on Ellesmere Junction Road, you do an upgrade in the section, not just the flag lights. So that's sort of how we're doing it, but it does need to be paid up, but we're working on that. The other question was in relation to
Block road upgrade.
Yes, we'll be overseeing the construction of that. They had their initial design sent in and said, no, you have to do more than that, so they've agreed to that. In terms of the width and the depth of base course, that will be checking the during construction as well. Just wait for them to let us know when that is. And the procedural order, in terms of low cost, low risk, the funding for that is over 3 years, and it's just noted by the auditor that we underspent in the first year of what we have programmed. We're going to overspend this year, and we'll spend it all in the last financial year. So over the 3 years, we'll spend all that money based on the program we've got there. In the first year is what we intend to do. But so that includes like the Dawson needs to cycleway part of it as well. So that's got a big chunk of that. That's over the next month we're going to spend. So if you look at our budgets, we're going to be overspent for low cost low risk this year, but in the NCTA one, we're actually going to be about right. And we'll have whatever's left next year, we'll spend that again.
Thank you, Councillor Rees.
I was going to ask about low cost low risk, but
thank you, Councillor Miller.
I wonder if you're able to tell me, I may go away and do some research. You would have contract 1292, General Signals and Jones Hospitals Road, the lead price of just over $1 million for one cost of 1.5. Are you able to know why large variance from lead prices?
Yeah, the main reason for that was the pavement work that we had to do, that had to be extended further from the section that was originally designed for in the last contract. So just the pavement that they found, they had to actually do more work on the base and sub-base. And so we upped the design of the section itself. So that was during the contract, that was previous variation. It was extra work that was needed. Once they actually found, they dug down the first material and what that.
Thank you. Councillor Eberhard.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Mark and Andrew, for your report. I just wanted to say a very special thank you to the people of Ellesmere and for cracking on with the cycleway. I know it'll be very well used and it'll serve a good purpose of getting our people safe and walking around and getting exercise. But I also wanted to say thank you very much for using local contractors. The council and so I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mover and seconder for this report. Alexander, Lyle, all those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Next report, Mark, is on seal operating inspections.
Yeah, so this is follow on from previous reports there, just a bit more detail on it. So I'll take it as report is read. Some of it's been repeated from previous reports and where we've got to. And so one of the main just might be the results, the graphs and things like that, the numbers there, and the questions you may have on that. So something that the data is messing around. So some of the maps are produced around, and I could do filters on that, and be quite good at some stage to filter the live use of that, so that any questions asked at the time, I can actually do the filter at the time, so I can see the results. So I just tried to capture quite a few of the different variants. But one thing that's come out and made these are results of people doing an inspection and doing a visual inspection, right? And the results show that there are more poor roads based on those inspections. That may not necessarily be the case. We know unsealed roads aren't spending enough money, so they probably have deteriorated. One thing that's come out of it is that all the roads that have been rated before, drainage is the significant factor in that. And one of the reasons that drainage is rated poor, most of the inspections was the place over. So we just need to go back and have a look to see whether that is actually the case, because drainage doesn't actually change the same as the carriage rate of an unsealed road. So over 2 years, you wouldn't see much difference in drainage from the first year to the second year, yet the inspections are showing. So we just need to do a bit of review on that. We've got the inspectors out there on a rainy day, which we're going to have one so far. It's been fine. So they've just got a list of roads we're going to have just to check on and see whether there might be high shoulders there, but the drainage might be perfectly okay. The water might be getting off and not bonding. So if that's the case, it's not where we're going to be spending the money, and the drainage money is not necessarily poor. Not that we want to change the results, and that I think this will be in the next inspection. A lot of inspectors will see that. So that's just one thing that came out of it. And the other thing, a comment might be made, is deterioration on unsealed road isn't because of lack of maintenance that deteriorate. Roads deteriorate because of use on them, and then you react to that use. So, and we have some roads, and there's a couple around Mitchell's Road. There's one that got used a lot by milk packers, for example, over a period of months. The road deteriorated from being okay to actually being in really poor condition. We have to do some work on it. And so unsealed roads can change quite quickly. It's not necessarily the contractor's done anything, and it's not because we haven't spent money on it, it's just the use has actually occurred on it for that period of time. That came with logging the rent as well. But we know we don't spend enough on unsealed roads, and we're never going to be able to. So it's just a matter of working out where we should be spending that money. So wasn't going to raise much more than that, other than just the other thing, unsealed funding. We have got some unsealed, so maintenance spending, but unsealed rehabs in our shovel ready project. So there's about $3 million that we've got sitting in there. If that got done, we've got extra funding for it, that'd be great. Yeah. That deferred maintenance will get it done, then we'll just almost be starting again. But we'll certainly by the next 12 months have another lot of roads that need to have maintenance specially done on. So it's not going to change that. It just means we get rid of that backlog in deferred maintenance. So it'd be great if we do get it, but if we don't, there's going to be $2 million in deferred maintenance that we're just going to keep on putting off because we haven't got money to do it. And we're going to overspend anyway. And most of our overspend is going to be on the seal payments, and unsealed roads, unfortunately, get left. They'll be the last ones that we do. There's less traffic on it, even though they have a big impact. So that was just in terms of our maintenance strategy. We'll always go to the sealed stuff first because that's where most traffic is. And tossing up between sealed and unsealed, which one we do, we'll do the sealed one. The unsealed gets left, and that's probably going to continue. So I don't think we're going to get any more money for that. In fact, looking in the future, we may start again. Yeah. That'll be the area we'll probably get less money. If you come and cut something out, probably unsealed roads is where you're going to start. So it's just a fact. And we can't do too much about it, but we'll do the best that we can to keep maintaining them. But some of the numbers, quite interesting in terms of kilometres of the network that are poor, and then doing a percentage, and obviously the percentage of poor ones has increased quite a bit. But one of the interesting ones is by ward, the number of poor ones. And because we've had a lot of calls about New Melbourne Ward being unsealed roads neglected, when actually that's the results of this show that the driving inspection they did, that's got the lowest percentage of poor roads from the assessment. And I can't explain why, but that's maybe a perception on that or in Melbourne or whatever it is. But just a result, it's got the higher number, so there's more kilometres of it. But in terms of percentage, it's a bit less. But the other thing I just checked on with over 2 years shows that the inspection said they've deteriorated. More poor roads. Just looking at service requests for unsealed roads, they would say about the same for the last 3 years. So there've been about 90 to 100 service requests on unsealed roads, which every 6 months. And so just looking at that, it was just, and it may not mean anything. The average over the last 10 years is about 118 every 6 months on unsealed roads. So I was just trying to relate that to the inspection of 6 monthly portions, whether that is an indication or not. It may not be, just that sometimes people call up about it, sometimes they don't. Snap and solve and giving council a call, so that's when numbers tend to go up with it. But whether it's because the roads are poor or not, I don't really know. So that's probably enough. If you've got any questions on the graphs, maps there, inspections overall, and perceptions, then.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, it's obviously not trending the way we want it to. State the obvious, and it's going the wrong way from, I guess, what our expectation and what our community's implementation is of our road network. Roads are so important to everyone, whether it's just driving around for social reasons or for business reasons. Our economy relies on a good road network. And we've talked in the past about having knowing the quantum of money required to lift our roads, that they would be measured as average rather than poor, average or above, or what level of poor do we actually accept? And while we haven't got a number for that, the fact that a great proportion as poor isn't necessarily, but it might be say maybe there's some variance in the way that they're being recorded. That's a great step they're actually recording legitimate data while we've got it. So through the annual plan that we'll be looking at in the next couple of weeks, is there a submission from staff around what is required and the dollar figure to lift that performance, and also acknowledging that we've talked about through the long-term plan, there being a bit of a review on road funding and looking at how some other councils use targeted rates in different ways. Waitaki was one example of charging forestry users slightly differently than the rest of the network's users. So some of the major reshuffle is going to need to be done through a long-term plan process, but for this year, is there any change in budget requested to improve performance of our road?
I haven't got a number, but I know there's $3 million of major spending, but $7 million a year. So if we don't get extra funding as part of the Shovel Ready Growth Fund, then that's going to be work we're not going to do. So there's a one-off. If there was $2 million there, it would get rid of that 2 years of food maintenance. And maintenance grading, that's about $1 million a year as well. If that can be agreed, the grading itself speeds most of that, but then you have other things that isolated work and stuff like that. So just in discussion with supervisors and road maintenance engineer, it's sort of got $1 million for each of those. If we had it, it would be nice. Accepting that not necessarily going to get it. Whether we can make a case at NTTA, we're going to get more of that. But if we don't, then if the council is able to come up with that, then we can certainly spend it. What the ratio of and how that much of that improves network, we won't know over time, but we know it will improve because we just do more work and spend the money. In terms of ratio between good, average, and poor, just put the numbers there, it's about 15% good, 50% poor, and 70% average. And if you've got an average one, it's like being effective. That might be as good as it's going to get having average, but just reduce the number of poor ones.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander and Councillor Miller.
I think I was actually going to yield to Councillor Miller first, because he's got some strong words to say about this. But I just really want to, first of all, Mark, to congratulate you on the report. You've used some reasonably firm language in it, which is good to see. But I really want to tease out the comments about the UK system and how they prioritise their works, whether that is something that you're recommending, a procedure that you recommend the way we work.
Yeah, there's one guy who's involved in a lot of asset management and looking at the backlog there. I think New Zealand is a really good position just how we look after our networks and how we get funded. UK, a lot of their local roads have been neglected for a long time, and there was a big push to have more funding than that. It's something like 10 billion euros to share around the whole country. But that was sort of an approach that they took for one county, decided to look at it that way rather than actually just focusing on all the ones that need a lot of work on them. They're spending more money over a lot more projects to actually just improve the ones that need less work rather than just focusing on the big ticket items. And that was just the way they dealt with it. It was just an option. And it's something we've talked about, we haven't put anything in place, but we'll have a discussion about it, and it'll be a mixture. You've got to do the bad ones, but you still might be able to do more average ones to make it good. Not spending so much money, it might just be doing the drainage on them. If you want to, it just improves the network quite a bit if we can spend more money on drainage as well.
You, Councillor Miller.
Hello, Councillor Alexander. I'm not going to be unrelentingly negative. No, I think the value here, I don't want to message it because Mark's giving us the message as with some clear scientific data. The problem we had before was we were putting our finger in the air, guessing in some respects, and this is driven out of our auditors actually asking us to develop, or asking our staff to develop a system of analysis. And so now we are starting to develop a trend and actually understand the realities of what has been verbally told to us by ratepayers for years is that the roads are bad, getting worse. So And data does tell the truth. And it's clear if you read the graphs, you read the data, that roads are investment, and gravel roads are investment get worse. Now, I think perhaps the proposition I want to you, Mark, is that whilst funding gravel and shingle roads might get less, I think if you survey the people who use those roads, they would much prefer a $5 million traffic light installation get deferred, and they have their road improved. Some people wait slightly longer in intersection and see. So I guess it's around priorities. That's the role of us and the team here to decide what is the priority. Is it essential to have a new set of traffic lights? We should be spending that $5 million on something else, and that'll be debated another day. But your analysis around the where the roads are worse, and probably, from my view, corresponds to the ground conditions. The further you get down, it gets better. So that's probably a reasonable analysis. But no, thank you for your analysis. I think we are building up scientific picture now, which I think is a bit valuable.
Thank you. Mover and seconder for the report. Gallagher, moved. And Lang, seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you, Mark and Andrew, for those reports. Page 114 through 117 is the solid waste monthly update. Andrew, Boyd, if you'd like to come to the front of the room. Do we have a move on the seconder to receive this report? Colin Muckford. Andrew.
Hi everyone, good to be back. Yeah, so I'll just update you on a couple of items within the report that have changed that Albertson's submitting, and otherwise was to take the report as read and just take questions. So the two items I wanted to specifically mention were, one was the farm waste days. I've since had confirmation that they will be kicking off later this year, so that's good news. There's just one question mark around whether or not silage rec can be a item that can be taken, because the solid rec contractor is a little bit reticent to be involved. There's been ongoing tensions with that recovery and plastic. So I'm pressing hard to get them to come to a solution on that, because I think it's a critical part of that whole farm waste day. And the other thing, other point I wanted to talk through was the H2 Solutions links in the report. So you'll remember Uniform and the discussions we had around the tire pyrolysis plant, which has since relocated their consent to Christchurch to make use of a commercial building that was available there. Since then, I was approached by H2 Solutions and was relatively reluctant to engage in conversation. I was sort of going to let it sort of rest. But upon further sort of looking at the company, they have some pretty interesting technology, and there's been a lot of companies coming out of the woodwork in recent times. So I've got two other people talking about various technologies and things. But the appeal of discussion so far with H2 is that it's European-based technology, so it meets the EU standards. So that's quite a significant traction. They have been around for about 15 years, and they operate in predominantly Western countries. The beauty of their machine is that they are very multi-material, so they've got a really diverse range of materials that they can process. And the reason why it's, I guess, of particular interest at the moment is that everyone's acutely aware of the international recycling situation, and there's a pretty huge drive to develop onshore processing for recycled materials. And I think that H2 have technology that potentially be part of that solution. They will certainly be a part of the puzzle at least. I also think, and this is where the kind of conversations I've sort of had so far have been sort of working towards, is that there's a good, potentially a good fit to sell with our rural urban split of district. around processing farm plastic, so it kind of almost ties into my previous point about farm waste days. So at the moment, the farm waste plastic that is collected is sensible, but they are interested in plants in the South Island, and there could be an option potentially to utilise this machine to process both silage wrap as well as commercial films from dairy farms and dairy factories, and maybe the soft plastic recycling scheme that is has had some issues since we started. So I guess I was just looking for a feel from councillors as to whether you're interested in getting H2 along to present and be provide, I guess, a bit more depth information about who they are and what they do at a subsequent future.
Thanks, Andrew, for the report. Interesting around recycling in particular, and obviously the changes during lockdown around not being able to recycle anything, and it'll be taken to landfill and then restarting it back up. Are you able to just give us a bit of an overview of how that has gone? Contaminated trucks cost the system a lot, and it doesn't have too much contamination in the recycling for it to end up at landfill. Can you just expand on that?
Yes, sure. It's been an interesting time. Trying to kind of communicate all those messages around, once the recycling plant was going to shut, make sure we're transparent about that. Of course, shortly, as soon as we got the messaging that I think was looking sort of imminent, we were trying to get advanced bring out to residents so that with the fortnightly cycle to get their bins cleaned up. So we tackled that pretty hard, pretty extensively with applications. And look, I really think it's paid off. Our contamination levels have been really, really good, comparatively, especially comparatively. I think we got the message pretty well. You can never get 100%, and people read things in different ways, but I'm pretty happy. The first 2 weeks we had 7% of loads rejected, which I can't remember quite the number of trucks it is, and that would be down to, I would estimate about 2% now. One on Friday, and you might have seen those Facebook photos. They were from the images I took on Monday morning when I visited the plant to get some shots. We felt it was important to let residents know that there's a cost involved, and actually when you see the material, the load of material from a truck, you can actually see there's a whole bin full there that was just treated purely as waste. There's another whole bin full there, and it's actually, on the whole, not that many people who are, making a whole load rejected. So we've been thrashing the marketing newspapers. We hope that's getting through. We hope it's been helpful. We've provided more information than ever before because we're increasingly recognising that people learn in different ways. So a lot of people might like Facebook and Nicole might like newspapers. Everyone's different. So we're just trying to tackle it. So that's how we're working on the moment. All the councils push very hard to try and get consistency around our messaging. So pretty much every Friday we start circulating our different media and comms, and it's really a sharing and plagiarise and use what you need, and everyone's working together. Because the sooner we get together and get a better result, the sooner
And just thinking the cost of a bin and contaminating a load is $1,000 more.
It's $1,300 for each load. But,
So where's the technology to be able to X the bin at source to be able to identify what's there and pass the cost on to those that are contaminating the system?
There'd be no automated system. But at the moment, there's a few different approaches. We have the cameras on the trucks that send loaders and tip to roll, and then the drivers are to tag it as contaminated and make a record, and we follow up with a letter and a note on the governments. But then you can go, we do audit crews up front, and we've been just
starting Monday this week, piloting a couple of people. That's already produced some results in the last couple of days. So we're just trialing that, and with a view to, once the RFID program is finished, to using those same people to do more extensive auditing. And it's not a big brother situation. It's really just trying to tackle those heavily contaminated bins and get to whatever
But yeah, it's not Big Brother, it's someone trying to pass the cost on to the community and the cost of life themselves. And we just need to think about how we do that. So well done on those ways of trying to monitor it. Recycling you've mentioned is generally happens offshore. Most of our recycling materials aren't recycled in New Zealand. Can you just elaborate on that? Because the people that I've spoken to in the community are quite unaware of, although we accept all these plastics, they're not actually recycled in New Zealand.
Yeah, so it's sort of a constantly evolving sort of creature. So traditionally in the South Island, most materials have gone straight offshore because the North Island can supply any sort of New Zealand-based recycling plants for different materials. A lot of companies, regardless of New Zealand facilities, would still just play the commodity market. So it's just like coffee or steel, gold. It's just not commodity to sell. However, with the Chinese national storage legislation, it has come in and stuck this time. We've had a couple of attempts. It's clear that the whole global system is changing. We've been really fortunate with our kind of regional approach to the recycling facility. And we've got good, strong relationships. So they are now able to process some of the P10 grade 1 plastics onshore through companies like Flight Plastics in Wellington. There's more of those companies popping up. Milk bottles are also, it varies, but some are supplied into New Zealand facilities. Cardboard's offshore, paper's offshore, metals are generally offshore, and glass is local, like emissions. I should just point out that paper is probably the highest risk of all our recyclables at the moment. It's heavily contaminated. Through the sorting facility, it's sort of where all the contamination goes through the sorting process. It always typically ends up in the paper, so it's the most heavily contaminated and already the lowest value product. So that's a significant risk to recycling in the future.
Thank you. And lastly, from me, the H2 solution. Let's bring that to council briefing and see what the needs to be done there. So we'll work on that. On my list, I've got Bob, Deborah, Mark, Nicole.
Just rubbish collection. Are we looking at extending any of the routes?
Yep. So we do, we consider route extensions on a frequent basis, and so anyone, I have seen a couple of submissions come from there. So we just have a process that we're going to put through the density with distance to the closest route at the moment. Sometimes they're miles off route, and we see if we can add additional people up, just those asking and make an extra loop. So we do it on a ongoing basis.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks very much. So thank you very much. I'm just interested in how we're managing, what is there an increase in vitamin and storage of contaminated material of properties. How's that to be managed going forward? Are we responsible for managing that environmentally? How's that going to be managed?
So Flighton sits under the roading department, and they can call directly around the roading software to show exactly where those sites are. So I don't actually have access to their system. Anecdotally, we have a bit of supply to them. I don't know if grant system. I do know of one in particular at Kopai Rest area on the way to up between Springfield and Hills. And I was advised of that, and so got the state highway contractor and copied and compliance people, so the information and like they can follow up. So that's my point of view. Did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, look, it depends if you talk about flights on the road, there's up on that road, that identify the spots, the tree, obviously, who's doing it. I just wonder if council has typical private property storage, private property, or just like.
No, I asked two questions, one related, the other was the storage of, I guess, materials, given fire, Weeks Road. How's that monitored? We think like of properties storing contaminated material that has actually caused fire over the last 10 years. It just seems to be a trend. And I just want to understand how that's monitored, who's responsible for monitoring it. If you know, understand how possible for addressing any adverse effects, are they also responsible for monitoring what actually storage like?
I'd have to pass that over to the broker services around the compliance side, to be honest, and around consent and storing waste on site. The only thing I'd say is there are national environmental standards underway for tyres, around lifting stockpiles of tyres, which I think would be a good thing. But I'll leave the response to the other points to terms of partner business.
Through PSM, he's going to give some rules to the storage of various materials in the district plan. There's also the national environmental standard for storage of tyres, which I think TCU has come into force or not will be soon. Very soon. So there are a range of measures in our district plan in terms of compliance. Our compliance team would respond to complaints normally, but if there was an obvious non-compliance that they saw, they'd also do some investigations. But as with a lot of compliance issues, it's very difficult for a small team of 3 or 4 people to go to the district to identify all those areas that non-compliant storage facilities on them, and rely heavily on neighbours, communities reporting these cases. There's a set of things associated.
Thank you, Mark, Nicole, and Shane.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for a great report. With respect to H2, I had written down yes. It's actually sounds like an even better potential solution than Inform would be. I think that the Mannion Road fire, it wasn't pretty good road, the Mannion Road fire actually demonstrates the need for a processing facility that can deal with some of these materials that are otherwise being stockpiled, and when they do get on fire, provide a great deal of problems for the wider community. So I'm supportive to hear from them. I'd be supportive of them if we can come to an appropriate arrangement for them to set up. It sounds like an ideal solution that they will deal with a number of products that we otherwise are struggling to find a good solution for.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Andrew. And firstly, the communications around recycling. There's been a number of questions come up, and it's really good to see the council's put up on this Facebook page asking people to put in questions about recycling to get through councils. And it's been good to see councils. And I also am interested in hearing from H2 Solutions. Questions I would have be around process on this that shows that they can take, says that they can take a number of different products, but what is actually being produced with them from them, and what and if they hit markets, that's what excuse me, will end up being used for. And with the recycling, this is something that's brought up with me yesterday as well, is that a lot of the waste that's produced is that people who are producing those products are making products that have those things in it disposed of. So this doesn't need to be answered now, but I would like to know where the government's product stewardship consultation and where they've got to, but I'm just looking at the website and they have closed on 4th of October 2019, really set 2020 submissions summarising their advice to cabinet, but it doesn't seem to have been moving forward about it. It'd be interesting to know if it's got to, because that could be alleviate some of the problems that actually got something in place.
Andrew, before I put it to you, I'll just run under the question and you can answer at the end. So next we have Councillor Eberhard, Councillor Miller.
Got it, Andrew. Thank you very much for the report. My question is just around the disposal process as well, and its ties, and whether it is pyrolysis disposal. But you don't have to answer that now.
Thank you, Councillor Miller.
Just noted in your report, Andrew, the farm waste days well supported last year, but suggesting alternating years. I think we really need to go annually. There's a large geographic separation there. You had to wait 2 years and waste on farm. Asking for a match to the appropriate place. Second thing is probably a big thumbs up to our ratepayers that exceptionally well getting back to recycling. Really, I have seen the other side of it. It's pretty not good. So well done to our ratepayers. The third thing was just about, you noted their community recycling days, and I thought we'd actually decided against that. We're talking about relaunching it. It was, if I remember it correctly, it was along the lines of the Auckland sort of put out here on the sidewalk and pick up type things. That's because there has to be a bit of community sort of look after themselves rather than us to keep, especially large as well, producing stuff themselves here.
Thank you. And Councillor Dennis.
Thank you for the report. I just want to say thank you for the resource recovery parking system. That worked pretty well. It was down there a few times with lots of lockdown rubbish and doing the and everything. And seemed to be working very well for everybody else who was going through that as well. As far as the recycling, yes, great question. Stuff going online. It's interesting to see people's debates around how there's so much stuff that can't be recycled now. But yeah, it's got to come down to that product stewardship stuff. I can stop using the non-recyclable materials, or at least that we can look at what number on the bottom of the packet is and make some choices as well potentially. And my main question though was around the H2 stuff, which sounds great, but if anything go ahead as well, do there be 2 facilities on South Island? And how long is that? Because obviously, want to run, they need enough feedstock to actually keep going.
Thanks. And Councillor Lyle.
Yeah, thank you for the report, Andrew. I'm very interested in the H2. I am very aware that Lincoln University is involved in the process with a Christchurch inventor, if you like, who are trying to get some money out of the provincial fund for developing a process of their own. So I would hope that if even if we might have heard from H2, we might listen to the locals as well, so rather by local, possibly.
Thanks for those comments and questions. Andrew, if you'd like to just, you got some notes there, yeah?
I've got a bit of 3-second memory span, so I'll try and work my way back. Thanks for the comments on the booking system. It's been really, really well received, and I take my help with the IT team to really make it. It's now been poached for dog control bookings and customer service AA bookings and the other. So it's obviously worked really well. Hoping to ditch it very shortly though, because of the 2 facilities comment, that's particularly why I sort of tried to step away. I've sort of said, look, there's already enough there to try and get down this pathway of fires if I was you, I'd probably we'd be looking at other material streams that are difficult and causing issues. So that's kind of where I've been discussing things. The beauty of this machine is that you could run it for 2 weeks on this material, make some alterations and run it for 2 weeks. So that's the impression I've got so far. In the community recycle days, I know Mark, Grant, sorry, Councillor Miller, what you're referring to, that was the discussion in the bylaw. These community recycling days are those twice a year setups for the community to bring their materials to a site, and there's a relationship with the local group to do the garden waste and the scrap metal on that, as opposed to the street side. Yeah, and they've kind of expanded it a whole bunch of groups. So, we have sort of lost track.
Let's just say if your question hasn't been answered, pop down and have a chat with Andrew following the meeting.
But right fast enough.
Thanks for bringing them up today. Had a mover and a second, Miller and Mugford. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Resolution that we move into PX. Moved. Nicole Reid, seconded Gallagher. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And we'll adjourn the meeting for a quarter of an hour and grab a cup of tea, and we'll start again at 3 o'clock. Before everyone leaves their desks, Jessie Burgess is in the room with us, and Jessie is leaving, sadly. Jessie is heading to ECAN, and I don't know, Jessie, if you want to just talk a little bit about what you're doing, but you've been a big part of our processes here in a really high growth space, understanding how we function with our neighbours through the Greater Christchurch Partnership, and also the development of our own town. So not only the local, but the regional contributions as well have been very valuable. I think what you've done, we wish you very well with your next role, and we know that we'll continue to probably liaise and work with you being there.